Are you ready to learn? Because my super experienced guests are ready to share some really valuable information. Make sure and listen all the way to the end to get help and support. So let's start with the best audio experience.
How to write for human being, and don't forget about search engines. It's very important today. You can't ignore anything, robots, people, because people can bounce fast if it's not interesting, and search engines can ignore, don't crawl your website even if it's valuable. I'm so excited to discuss this topic with Maddy Osman. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me back again.
Yeah, big pleasure. I got a lot of valuable insights. That's why I decided to invite you one more time to get more value. I know you can share value as much as possible. Maybe before we start, just tell more about your self-experience, background. Remind our audience what you do, about your book, where you, by the way, share all this topic. Give a strong reason to read this book as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm Maddy Osman. I run a content agency primarily for B2B technology brands called The Blogsmith. And my book, which is, somewhat what we're going to touch on today, Writing for Humans and Robots, The New Rules of Content Style, is really about bridging that gap between writing for humans, but also satisfying the needs of search engine robots. And I'm tuning in today from Lakewood, Colorado. So that's where in the world I'm at. And I'm excited to dig in because I think that since we last talked, a lot has happened in the world of AI writing, AI search. So it's definitely a very timely topic to determine, where do you fit into this mix? How do you take advantage of tools and things like that? But also, how do you continue to have that human touch that at this point I think only we can add?
Nice. You touched about AI. It's that was simple to ignore, hard today, impossible tomorrow. Yeah, because AI is a regular tool. I used before ChatGPT. Right now, I can use a lot more. But Maddy, I found that many content creators, writers, authors, they overuse AI, ChatGPT, and some of them can post for Forbes, Bloomberg, Investopedia, because I work a lot on finance niche, and I found all of them, without any exception, you use ChatGPT, and I love AI, but I can feel that AI is the best rewriting tool ever. Rewriting, you can get 100% of uniqueness. You can cheat tools, but you can't cheat people. You can't cheat Google, because people, if they find the same content online, if you have rewritten this content, rephrased, it's the same. It's like to ask about a new movie. I often ask my friends about a new movie because I want to save my time, and the most common reply, nothing special. I watch many similar movies, the same plot. Can you tell how to use AI, not overuse, because most content creators overuse it?
Sure, absolutely. I think you bring up a really good point, which is that one of the strengths of using AI text tools is the ability to rewrite existing text. And I think instead of thinking about using it to rewrite maybe somebody else's text, I think one of the great applications of AI is using it to help you find the best way to present your own ideas. So there's this one AI generative text tool that it's like a Google Docs add-on. It's called WordTune. And that's a favorite of mine because basically the way it works is, I'll type some sentences in Google Docs, and I think every writer at some point struggles with, there's something that sounds a little bit off about that, or I just don't know how to communicate that idea, this first go around. Sometimes edits take a long time because you're trying to find that perfect word or that perfect phrase. And as humans, sometimes it just escapes us naturally because our brains do not have infinite capacity like an AI's stores of data do. And so what's really great about a tool like WordTune is it takes your text and it makes suggestions, how to make it longer or shorter, how to rephrase it, different things along those lines. So I think that's a great use of an AI tool, because you're not trying to get it to completely make something up. You're using it to wield the power of your own words and making them stronger. So that's one way that I think AI text or AI tools can be really helpful. I think the other way that I like to think about AI text tools, again, is really not so much to go from start to finish, in one click of a button, but it's things like, perhaps helping with the research side of content creation, grabbing, relevant sources and statistics and keyword phrases to think about. So tools like ClearScope or Phrase are really great for that research aspect of it. And you still, again, have to add your human intuition, because what those tools are doing is telling you this is what already exists. So you have to then, factor in, well, what isn't already covered? How can I make something that's truly unique? How can I, perhaps add some unique expert insight that wasn't present in these existing articles that are already ranking? And then it's things like, it can help you with not starting with a blank page, things like maybe generating a basic outline, maybe helping to refine your page title, maybe even helping to create an introduction to a topic or something, things that'll help kick you off so that you can then start writing without anything getting in the way. But again, with each of these steps, you have to take it with a grain of salt. And maybe one thing we can get into is sort of like the limitations of these tools, because especially with ChatGPT, one of the main limitations is that when we're talking about facts, it is confidently incorrect. And so that adds actually another step to your process, is really to fact check the output of a tool like ChatGPT.
Yeah, you mentioned about this tool, ClearScope. I spoke with Bernard Huang.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, on my podcast, I spoke with Jeff Coyle, who co-founder of Market News. And
Cool.
can you tell how to use these tools? I mean, like the correct way, because
Sure.
when we get suggestions from this tool, and I see when content creators add all these keywords, all these suggestions, but it's overstuffing. It's not for human being. So, can you tell how to find the right keywords from these suggestions?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think just like anything else we're kind of talking about today, it's a tool. It still needs your human input. It still needs your insight. It still needs, to some extent, like your subject matter expertise on the topic, because again, what it's doing is it's using AI and machine learning to scrape the top results for a given keyword. So it really starts with keyword research. You have to kind of start, like our team, when we use ClearScope for essentially any piece that's over 1,000 words, anything that we're aiming to rank for. And so for us, it starts with our keyword research process and identifying a primary keyword that we want to go after. It's only at that point that we then generate one of those reports, because we want it to be specific to that keyword. Same thing if we use a tool like Phrase or Surfer or Market Muse to some extent. And each of them have their own features and specialties that they work with. But ClearScope for us is really the main one that we use. And so it's a matter of doing your keyword research, generating the report, and then looking through that report, and of course taking those suggestions into mind in terms of semantic keywords that it recommends, but also understanding where some of those suggestions might be coming from places that it may be pulling like in irrelevant results. It may be pulling something that is like kind of at a different extreme of the topic than what you plan to cover. And so we never approach it like you have to use all these terms. And to some extent, we don't approach it like you have to get to an A+. So ClearScope has this sort of like rating scale of how effectively you're incorporating your suggestions as part of this content optimization process, when you're writing the draft, when you're incorporating the terms, when you're, trying to achieve a certain readability level. That's another thing that ClearScope suggests topic by topic. So we don't look at it as having to sort of like check every box, but it is, again, using the tool for its strengths, but also using our human intuition and sometimes even digging in. And I mean, another thing with ClearScope or any tool like it is you get a suggested word count. And sometimes we'll dig in and see, there might be something that's skewing that number. Like really the top ranking results maybe aren't as long as what this like average target word count is suggesting. So again, like you still have to, do your own research essentially. You still have to kind of double check the output. And it is a great starting point. It is something that saves a lot of time. But I don't think with any tool that you should rely on it outright without looking into kind of what it's suggesting.
Nice. Awesome. Maddy, I found that book authors are great with sharing stories. Once I spoke with Jim Edwards. He told me, he worked in Business Insider 10 years. He started on this company from scratch. Then company was sold for $500 million, good success.
Nice.
And he told me that success of Business Insider depends on creating non-boring content. Now, business niche is boring, but Business Insider found the way how entertain the audience. And I see the same issue with books, because books share stories, good stories. It's interesting to read, but not all books. Some business books are good for sleeping. When you take this book, it's valuable, but after reading, you can sleep well. You don't need medicine pills. Just take a new boring book. So, can you tell your way how to share value, but not boring? Because you mentioned that you cooperate with B2B brands and most content probably boring, but how to entertain and share value as well.
Totally. No, I think that's a great point. And I'm maybe a bit of an outlier. I love reading fiction books, but I'm actually not put off by like a boring business book. That's kind of my jam. So I'm like the weirdo in that regard. But I do have a chapter in my book, Writing for Humans and Robots, that is about storytelling, and especially in terms of, like the business storytelling, which is a little bit different than kind of like the fun fiction and fables and, things like that you go to a fiction book for. But I think essentially when it comes to like my niche specifically, this like B2B tech or even just B2B in general, is to think in terms of the same storytelling elements. You still have to have like a conflict. You still have to have a resolution. You have to kind of arrange your text and the way you talk about things in terms of, somebody overcoming an obstacle and talking through the way they got there, talking through to some extent like the sales funnel and the decision-making process. How do you sort of go from I have this problem to here's a possible set of solutions, and then in terms of the specific B2B technology company we're writing about, how did they become the top solution that then solved this person's problem and became the savior of whatever it is they're dealing with. And also thinking in terms of the customer being the hero and the company being the resolution maker for them. So I think it's still beneficial to think in terms of these storytelling elements, and it's just adapting them to sort of a different medium. I think the other thing too is thinking about your product and solution in terms of, how can you weave that into whatever content piece you're creating. So it's not just this, faceless how-to article or whatever that's generally talking about a certain topic, but it's like, how does this product fit into that topic? How can you weave it back to you, and not in an overly salesy way, but just showing how your product or your solution can effectively solve that problem with really specific examples, screenshots, and things like that. And on that note, I think it's also about using effective visuals because people are visual creatures. We all have different learning styles. And again, where I might like that, boring business book that's like text heavy and I'm happy to just like kind of get through it because I'm after the knowledge that's within. I guess it's fair to say that it's a lot easier to read a book that, has charts and diagrams and even like character illustration, something of visual interest to just break up the text. Because I think when it comes to writing for humans specifically, if you're presented with a wall of text, it almost just feels like this mountain to climb. And if instead, you're incorporating effective visuals to help tell that story, it feels like the time goes by a lot faster, even if there are more things that are kind of stopping you along the way, just because again, people learn in all different ways, and visuals are an effective way to progress the story.
Nice, nice. I want to ask more about AI because
Sure.
I check out why content creators complain about AI because it's not creative. Creativity is another point that very important.
Yes.
And once read an article about Lloyd Richardson. He published a book 11 years ago, but he spent 14 years to write this book. So he spent
Wow.
14 years to write a book, published, and he couldn't sell this book for 11 years. He
Oh, I
tried
think I know what
marketing,
you're talking
sales.
about. Yeah.
Yeah. But then his daughter posted content on TikTok from account with 0 followers,
I love
and
it.
this video became viral. Plus 50 million people watch this video. Of course, I watched this video because I'm curious how to film such videos. And
Absolutely.
yeah, I found this video doesn't have nice looking design, but it's creative, it's
Right.
interesting, and it provokes curiosity to read this book. What kind
Right.
of book is this? And today this book is bestseller on Amazon. A simple video makes a better job than sales marketing methods, generic methods. So can you tell how to be creative in your content to overcome your competitors?
Sure. Yeah, no, I love that story because it is a story. It's a human story. And I think another thing that that video did was really spark that human emotion, right? Because we all put ourselves in her dad's shoes in terms of like, wow, you really poured yourself into making this book. I mean, I felt that, right? After having written my own and knowing just how hard that process is. And I mean, I think his book was fiction. I can't even imagine writing a fiction book. I think that's like a whole other harder thing to do. That does require a lot of creativity. And so just the fact that, here he is like just kind of like waiting for something to happen. I think it struck a chord and all as humans to be the ones to say, your book has value, like we want to support you. And I think your point that like the production value of that TikTok was pretty low. It wasn't overly produced, it didn't have a lot of like post edits or anything like that. That just added to sort of the authenticity of really her ask to support her dad and to just give his book a chance. And there's something very endearing about that. And so that's something that, yeah, I don't think an AI could come up with at this point. And maybe it can learn, from examples like that. But I don't think it's necessarily nuanced. And I think that's like the main issue with AI and creativity is a lack of nuance. And I think like when we're talking about reading a fiction book and your favorite author and just like the way that they spin words, like a turn of phrase that's especially savory or whatever. It's like that's just not something an AI can do. They can generalize, they can approximate, but they can't get nuance because they don't feel the same things that we feel. So that's always going to be a limitation of theirs, at least until they achieve sentience. But we're hoping
Yeah.
that's at least a little bit further out. So yeah, to answer your question about how to better like infuse creativity into your work, and I guess one other note about AI and creativity is the fact that I kind of view, if you're treating using generative text as something that replaces either large parts or the entirety of your own writing process, I really see that as a breach of ethics, honestly, because it's essentially plagiarizing other people's work and possibly multiple other people's work. But I think it was Futurism. There's a couple different outlets that covered it, but Futurism has a great series of articles about that CNET like bank rate, where they had come out and said many months ago, you know, we're testing at AI. We still have like a human editor who goes through and fact checks it, but you know, we stand behind these articles that we've produced, and you know, we think that they're technically right. And what's really interesting about just this specific case study is if you kind of go back to the way that Google talks about content and how they rank content and even how they sort of like devalue content, Bankrate operates in the space of your money, your life, which is like their highest tier of content for them. It has the highest standards, you know, it has the most potential negative effects on us humans, because it's talking about especially like financial topics, like, you know, how to decide on a mortgage, how to pick a college, you know, understanding ratios for making financial decisions. And Futurism found, or, you know, again, maybe it was a series of outlets and they just reported on it, but they found that that Bankrate had published several pieces that were actually quite misleading. Again, not because that was their intention, but because they hadn't properly fact checked the AI. In addition to the fact that they were also plagiarizing from different Forbes articles. In fact, word for word in some instances, even the titles of the articles or the titles of sections or specific examples used, which isn't surprising, right? You can't look at every single article out there, and you know, tools like Copyscape are great for looking for human plagiarism, but they're not. It's fine-tuned for finding that spun up AI plagiarism. And so, you know, it ended up being a huge headache, not only that they admitted to it, but then they were caught plagiarizing, and, you know, kind of going against the spirit of your money, your life, and steering people in the right direction. And so I think that's something for all of us to think about is like, do we want to put ourselves in this position where we're steering people the wrong way because we didn't create the content, so we can't stand behind it, you know, without really extensive fact checking? And ultimately, does that fact checking really, is it better to spend your time on that, or is it better to spend your time on creativity? And so getting back to your original question, how do you create creativity? Again, I think the visuals is a big thing. That's something that you can add, you know, that it's something where you can sort of, you know, even if you're quoting a statistic that somebody else has shared, maybe you can visually present that in a new way that helps people to understand it better. Another thing I think that's great is to try to think about a topic in terms of just a slightly different angle than what's already been covered. You know, think about it in terms of, how can I turn this into like a thought leadership piece because I really have a different opinion, or yeah, again, just like a slightly different take than what's sort of the commonly covered angle, you know, just take it from a different perspective. And on that note, also thinking about, you know, weaving in some new subject matter expertise, you know, maybe by interviewing a subject matter expert on a topic, you come across a totally different angle, or even just a different way to think about things, that you wouldn't have thought about if you yourself are not a subject matter expert and you hadn't taken the time to talk to one. So I think those are a couple ways that you can create uniqueness in content. Certainly there are many others. But I think what it comes down to is really the conscious effort of creating something new that's not like what's already out there, because my personal opinion is why create it if it's already been done? You know, rephrasing things or reformatting things is really not enough as far as I'm concerned.
Nice. Love it. Maddy, I have the question about emotions. You mentioned
Sure.
that it's better to provoke these emotions, and you remind me about Apple. I think Steve Jobs was good by sharing stories. Today,
Hmm.
Tim Cook can do it, can
Totally.
provide a good job. And once I watched presentation about new Apple Watch. After that, I bought 3 pairs for me, for my
Nice.
wife, for my son, because these guys probably kill me, if I buy only for myself. But after watching this presentation, I
Mhm.
got the feeling I need to own this Apple Watch. I need to have it because this gadget can simplify my life, decide my problems. Yeah, I got
Sure.
this feeling. And I see when brands, companies share a lot of features. Apple
Sure.
didn't share these features. You can find these features on some specific pages, but
Sure.
in the first page, you get I don't know, like you get the feeling of owning this gadget stuff. So can you tell
Sure.
how to do it, how to provoke these emotions by sharing stories?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it's so interesting. Like, we're both marketers, but we're also both like susceptible to to those emotional ploys. Like, we know what's happening, right? Probably more than the average person, in fact. But it's like, no, I kind of want to be sold on that, so that's okay. I mean, it happens all the time, and I'm also an Apple junkie, so I can't help it. I think what it like, if you were to boil it down to a couple of quick things, and then the harder part is putting this into action effectively. But and it's really what you said. It's not so much focusing on the features. It's this size, it comes in these colors, it uses this processor or something like that. Nobody cares about that except for the tech junkies, and
Yeah.
even to them, it's probably a secondary thing to, again, how it makes them feel to wear that product, to feel that brand affinity, to be accepted, by others who have the same taste, right? Or who are trying to solve the same problems. So I think that it comes down to not focusing on the features. You can definitely document them somewhere on your product page, as almost an afterthought, but more again about like benefits, and kind of the end result. I think like another thing I notice about Apple specifically is a lot of their commercials now, and really for the past however many years, have focused on very specific situations, like emotional situations. They're almost like these mini, like, cinematic, not documentaries, but it's kind of like a moment in the life of somebody using these products. Like, there's a woman and her son, and she's filming him racing for a championship or whatever, and they're showing like the stabilization technology of the newest iPhone. But again, yeah, they're not so much focusing on like, here's like every little detail about this cool phone, which there are many upgrades that they made since the last one. It's more about, it empowered this family to capture a big moment, and to watch the son get the win, basically, and to do it in a way that's not this like Blair Witch, shaky scary video that nobody's going to watch, but they might actually like be interested in it because like it is a cinematic masterpiece that an amateur shot, essentially. So that's part of it too, is like creating sort of the creative and visuals that tell that story, right,
Yeah.
without digging into the features. And I think just in general, when it comes to B2B technology, software as a service, it's all about sending or selling the solution to a problem, not so much how you get there, but the end result, the value that your tool can bring. And I think it's the same thing with selling services too. Like, if I'm reaching out to potential clients, they're not as concerned with the specific details of how we get there. It's what is the end result, and what does that do for my company? How does that help me with my bottom line? How do I sell this, to my higher ups as something that's worth investing money in? And so, to some extent, it's also about positioning, and positioning your solution not as an expense, right, but as an investment. So it's all these like little things. I think marketing, the study of marketing in general, or the execution of marketing is figuring out that nuance, which again is what we humans are uniquely great at. So I think that's still, I think our jobs are still safe for now. But we can use tools like these AI tools to help us, maybe in the earlier stages with the research, with setting us up for success, with thinking about competitors and what it is about them that ticks. Like there's still so many benefits that these AI tools can provide us, so long as we are not solely focusing on them to get to that end result, and we're willing to put the time and energy into adding that human nuance that only we can add.
Yeah. I remember another advertisement from Apple when the first airport came to the world, and the message was 1,000 songs in your pocket, not 10 gigabyte of memory.
Right.
Yeah. And it looks much better, when you have 1,000 songs in your pocket.
Right.
Maddy, I have the question about AI. It's interesting. I had the conversation with Jeff Coyle, the founder of Market News, yesterday, and he told me that the future will be divided by three companies. Now, the first type of company that create AI, the second who adopt AI, and third type obsolete companies, who can leave the trade, because we can't ignore this tool. It's impossible and it's growing. Can you tell how your company adopts AI today and tips for others how to do it right?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think I definitely agree with that. I believe that AI is a great tool. I think my addition to those thoughts is, I think that if you're willing to partner with it, that's probably the best case scenario. If you ignore it or see it as a threat, then you're going to fall into that obsolete companies category. And so, definitely something to avoid. For us, I think, again, like we use tools like Phrase and ClearScope, and we do use Market Muse too, which I know is very AI driven. So yeah, it's infusing it into parts of the process without letting it sort of negatively influence like the end of the process. So for us, it's very much beginning of the process, doing the research, helping maybe with some rewriting of text that you've already created, and pretty sparingly. Right now, our like what we talk to writers about and editors on our team is, we're going to run your content through an AI checking tool because we don't want you to rely on it. And again, I think there's room for experimentation. I think that's where we're at right now is, would it help create an outline? Would it help sort of kickstart an intro that you then go in and fine tune? But I'm just at this point not totally comfortable just kind of letting everybody use it for a bunch of different things. It's very much experimental. It's very much something that we're looking out for. And it's also creating guidelines. Like, how do you, outside of using these tools, how do you identify AI generated text? Because those tools are not perfect. I mean, they're not going to catch everything because they're so new, and because it's such an evolving field. And we had Chat GPT, or we had GPT-3, and then we had GPT-4. Like, even these models of AI are rapidly getting better, or just changing. And so even to like detect it it's kind of a moving target, to be able to say definitively if text is AI written or human written. So yeah, it's kind of like a cautious partnering, I would say, at this point. But it's something that, the other part of it too is, we're playing around with Chat GPT, and I think there are so many cool ways to use it. One person that I follow that has a lot of great ideas that I've tested out myself is Jimmy Rose. He's like a Zapier automation expert. He's the founder of Content Snare. And so he's doing a lot of different experiments and sort of like trying them out in public, sharing his results. One that I really liked was essentially taking transcripts of sort of like voice of the customer interviews that he was having about his product and feeding those to Chat GPT, but also saying, this is my product, this is kind of like what it does. Pull out some examples where, in this chat, the customer's talking about how my product helped them to achieve, their end goals based on the type of company that they are, or, specific examples of language that they use. So I think that there's a real benefit to using Chat GPT, again, to supplement the fact that like he already did this interview with his customer. That's the human touch, right? Like that already happened. But now he's using Chat GPT to create efficiencies so that he's not, going back and forth over this interview to try to find, really specific things. And he could still do that, but he's using Chat GPT to create an efficiency. And another way that I've used Chat GPT in a similar way, and this might have also come from him, but is to take voice notes. So sometimes I find it easier, instead of just going straight to Google Docs and starting to type, a blog post or something like that, to go to voice memo. And especially if I'm just like driving around and I have something on my mind, I'll record myself talking about a topic. And then what I'll do is I'll feed a transcript of that recording to Chat GPT and say, okay, here's kind of like, 5 subheadings I think that this topic is composed of. I could probably even ask Chat GPT to suggest those, but usually I have an idea going into it. And then can you just create an outline for me based on, my rambling notes that, I gave the voice memo thing. So I think that's another great use case where it's my ideas. I'm just asking Chat GPT to help me organize them and to create efficiencies so that I'm not going in and formatting, and listening multiple times to grab the points. So I think that's really the best, what I see right now. Some of the best use cases of AI are to help with research and to help with efficiencies. So that's probably the easiest way to summarize how I approach it right now.
Nice, awesome. I love it. And Maddy, my next question about something that I often do. Mistakes. I found that when you start something new, you need to make mistakes. Even if you keep doing this, you have these mistakes. But I don't know another way how to learn, because I usually check out best practices, generic strategies, and then I can think how I can adapt and do mistakes to learn it.
Sure.
And go ahead. Can you list common mistakes that companies, content creators still do by writing text for human being and search engines, and your tips how to find a much better way?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think my initial response to that is I always tell people on my team, and especially when we're working with a new client who wants to have, a lot of input into something almost to the expense of like getting it done and published, I always say done is better than perfect. And that's not to say that we want to publish something that isn't representative of their brand or that has a ton of errors in it. It's just that you can get to a point where you're almost like over optimizing, over editing, and then you never create like a consistent publishing schedule because you're so caught up in every little word. And I think as a founder of a company, that's another thing that I've had to come to terms with, even outside of the content writing world. But there's a certain way that I might go about executing a task, and it in some ways it differs from how someone on my team might execute it. And ultimately, I think when it comes to just like delegation in general, it's good to set parameters for what you're looking for, to give examples or things like that. But it doesn't have to be you who does the task, and somebody else again might do it a little bit differently. But as long as it's achieving, whatever end result you're after, even if it's a little bit different than how you would have done it, I would count that as a win over having to do it yourself. And, maybe it never getting done because you have a to-do list a mile high of other things that you're probably never going to get to either. So I think that's just a good perspective to bring into content creation, marketing in general, running a company. Done is better than perfect. And the great thing about writing for the web is that it is a very forgiving medium compared to like when I wrote my book and, I went over it a billion times to make sure that, everything was formatted correctly and, the image captions made sense. And even like the images themselves didn't have any errors. I mean, it was a high level of detail because it's immortalized in print. And Amazon doesn't make it easy to, even if I found errors, to submit like it would basically be a new edition instead of just replacing, the existing one. And so writing for the web is great because you can always edit your draft. And I think not to say that the bar is lower where people like expect errors, but it's just understood that especially if you're writing about a timely topic, there is some maybe sacrifice in terms of, overanalyzing, over editing in order to get something live in a timely fashion. So people to some extent expect that there may be some spelling or grammatical errors. Of course, it's not the goal, but it happens when you write for the web. And the great thing is that you can edit it after the fact, and it doesn't hurt anybody. So yeah, in terms of mistakes when it comes to writing for humans and robots, I mean, I think maybe the biggest one is just a reliance or maybe a misunderstanding of sort of like the black hat SEO tactics of the past. And I'm talking about things like stuffing keywords, using an exact keyword phrase a million times in your piece of content. And, the thing that some people just don't realize is that it's not necessary anymore. Google has evolved their algorithm to not need that sort of over optimization, overstuffing. You can be effective with many less uses of that keyword. And in fact, it would be better to use semantic phrases that are related, that use slightly different words. It would be much better to focus on weaving those in naturally over using the same key phrase over and over and over again. Essentially, I think that the best sort of guidelines for understanding if you're towing that line well, or if you're kind of falling to the side of over optimizing for the robots, is Google's helpful content update, which came about in the fall of 2022. And it gives you questions that you can ask yourself. Does this sound people first? Or does this sound like I wrote it primarily for search? So looking up those questions, which you could probably find pretty quickly just by Googling Google's helpful content update, questions. I think that's the best way to determine if you're making a mistake in sort of this modern era of Google. They give a lot of great parameters for thinking about that.
Yeah, valuable. And Maddy, I have the final question.
Let's hear it.
About your experience. I found that I usually get good results with clients who understand SEO. If they don't, I tell them, take my course. It costs like $10, $20. Learn from scratch, understand the basic. Then we can cooperate like a cohesive team. Because if customers don't understand how it works, just ask, please provide me traffic. Oh, no way. Traffic doesn't sell. And it's the same like, I don't know, if someone wanna lose weight. Yeah, you need to understand why you need to eat healthy food, drink water, train hard. Let's imagine you started today from scratch without any experience, knowledge, skills. You didn't write this awesome book about writing for human and robots. What will you do today to learn more about writing for search engines and human being?
Sure. Yeah, this might be more of a general answer, but what really led me down this path is I started my own blog before I decided to freelance write full time, which then led to the agency. I had some experience blogging for other people before that, mostly for the University of Iowa. I contributed to their study abroad blog and then their Department of Student Life blog. And so I I had sort of gotten a taste of what it was like to create content for the web in that regard. But I graduated school and I had a sales job, and I just was feeling, very creatively unfulfilled. Sales is so formulaic, it's kind of like the same thing. You get thrown different challenges to overcome, and that's the exciting part. But it's almost, for lack of a better word, like scripted. There's a very clear path forward. And so I was having a bit of an existential crisis and trying to figure out, like, if I'm not doing this, what do I want to do? And it wasn't until I created a blog kind of as a hobby, but really as a way to test different digital marketing tactics to see what I liked, what I could be effective at. That's when I really discovered a love of SEO, in addition to the creativity and the writing part. But as far as like getting people to come to that website, that's where I it was like, a baptism by fire, learning how to do that while putting this blog together. And so in terms of writing for humans and robots, I think that that's something that just comes from writing a lot of content, and ideally sharing it with people who aren't afraid to give you an honest opinion about it. There are certain Slack groups and things like that. Superpath comes to mind, top of the funnel, Peak Freelance, if it's something that you want to do as, like a job. And I think that there are individuals and groups within those Slack communities that are willing to give that, sometimes hard to hear feedback, but useful feedback. And so I would say, find that group that's going to be honest with you so you can improve, and so that you can identify if that's the way that you're writing. But also, just get out there and test different things, ideally outside of, or, perhaps before making it into like your full career or something like that. But if you're trying to learn and you're trying to sort of bridge that gap between this is what you're doing now and this is what you want to do later, I think that starting your own blog, and it doesn't have to be, all about marketing or whatever. My blog was a Chicago lifestyle blog. It was just about living in the city, enjoying life on a budget, because, I was a recent grad. That's what made me happy. So it could be about literally anything, but it's just an opportunity to start testing things and to start creating, like your own formulas for how you do stuff.
Yeah, awesome. I love it. I agree with that, because practice makes miracle. It's not like to learn how to write. You need to write. It's like, no.
It's the only way.
Yeah, Cristiano Ronaldo prefers to hit a ball 1,000 times than to learn how to play soccer. So
right.
it's more about practice. Maddy, it's a big pleasure to get again on my show, to learn from you. Tell our audience the best way how to keep learning from you, how to reach out to you, how to follow you.
Sure. Yeah, I would say I'm most active on Twitter. So I'm at Maddy Osman on Twitter. Also love to connect on LinkedIn. So look for Madeline Osman there. And then, my book is probably the best way to learn from my processes, writing for humans and robots, the new rules of content style. And if you want to see, what I'm doing in terms of things with my agency, it's theblogsmith.com. So pretty much online, almost wherever you can imagine, with the exception of TikTok. I haven't gotten into that.
Okay, got it. Guys, you can find all these links in the description below. Listen us on Apple, Google, Spotify. Thanks again for your time. Love it. So valuable. You need to read this book, guys. You can see a lot of value. Okay, love you. See you.